Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, and you're not going to believe what we're talking about now. This one's going to be interesting, folks. I guarantee it. I mean, I have to say, today is August 29th. It is my birthday. I am 59 years old today, and you'd think I have nothing better to do but sit around and make videos. Actually, I love doing this. This is my birthday treat. And as my birthday treat, what I'm listening to is Zelenka, the Penitents at the Sepulcher of the Redeemer. Yeah, I mean, like, really. The Penitents at the Sepulcher of the Redeemer. Actually, it's Italian, and we should be happy about that because it could have been in Latin, which would have been even worse. It's I Penitenti al Sepulcro del Redentore. And it's an indication of the fact that I am listening to this thing on my birthday, that it's a lot more fun than the title might at first suggest. I'm doing this for a purpose, to show you just what a great composer Zelenka was and what a good time he is, even on your birthday. On the other hand, you know, there were many famous people who were born on August 29th, including Michael Jackson, Ingrid Bergman, John McCain, and Maurice Maeterlinck, the, author of Pélias et Mélisande. And I'm happy to say I'm doing better than all of them. So there. But I'm really serious about this. Serious in a sick sort of way. How many people, even when it's not their birthday, are going to want to sit and listen to penitential Catholic Baroque oratorios? I mean, shall we say that that's a niche? I mean, a serious niche in the classical music world. And I'm in an even weirder situation because I'm a not terribly religious Jewish person who really doesn't care about any of this stuff. I mean, I don't care about Catholics or Protestants or even Jewish liturgy or, I'm just not into it. I'm not into the religion thing. I'm speaking personally. I know some of you are, and it's no disrespect. I mean, that's just me. But I love music. And if you love music, you have to come to grips with the fact that a great deal of the liturgy, particularly in earlier centuries, liturgy of the repertoire is liturgical music. It's Christian liturgical music, mostly Catholic. Then eventually, after the Reformation, it's Protestant. And, I know the entire Mass in Latin, the whole thing. Soup to nuts. I know most of the liturgy in Latin. You just wind up learning it and you know it. And whether you believe it or not is irrelevant. What matters is how wonderful the music is. And as with all great music, how appropriate the music is to the setting of the words that the people are singing. I mean, that's the only thing that matters in the final analysis. Am I right? So, I mean, let me give you my sense of how clueless I am when it comes to this stuff. And some of you already know, because when I talked about Haydn's 7 last words, it was very clear I did not know my Gospel of John. And you all corrected me on some of the things I said there, and rightly so. I have no problem with that either. But I really, I'm embarrassed to say that a lot of what I'm talking about, I'm speaking as an outsider, and this is striking me all as it's all news to me. You know what I mean? I mean, when I was younger, I was rehearsing a grammar school play. It was Peter Pan, in fact, and we were at Christ the Redeemer Church in good old Milford, Connecticut, and we were doing our rehearsal, and we were young, we were kids. I was like in, 4th grade or something, and we were all playing around outside, and I got my hands all muddy, and it was time to come in for the actual rehearsal. And I saw this sink, this basin sitting there in the lobby of the church. I thought, oh, great, they have a sink. So I washed my hands and got myself all nice and clean. And this priest walked up behind me and looked at me. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just washing my hands in the sink." He said, "That's not a sink." I said, "Isn't it? What is it?" What is it in there? He said, "That's holy water." And I looked at him and I just, "Well, how do you know?" That's my experience with, Catholic things. So forgive me if I get this all messed up and I dropped my booklet. Hang on a second. Let me go pick it up. Okay, we're back. Now, all of that is a long and digressive way of saying that Zelenka is just such a riot as a composer. He is so much fun, so ear-catching, so consistently inventive. He's one of the few Baroque composers who doesn't sound like every other Baroque composer. You know what I mean? You know, the all Baroque music sounds alike school, which has a certain grain of truth, to be honest. Well, Zelenka doesn't sound like that. He doesn't sound like that at all. His music is quirky. I mean, it's really quirky. He writes these long, angular orchestral ritornellos before his arias that all have odd prime number phrasing. I mean, 8-bar phrases? Nah, he never does that. He writes constantly syncopated rhythms. He uses what sounds like suspiciously Czech music way before people were doing Czech nationalist music. He was Czech, by the way. His music is fascinating. And so I'm going to prove it to you. And I'm going to prove it to you by taking you through this singularly grim-sounding, absolutely dismal. I mean, his middle name was Dismal, by the way. It was Jan Dismas, as in miserable, Zelenka. We don't know why he decided to pick that one. Anyway, this oratorio. Now, what happens in these, allegorical biblical oratorios? What happens is, in this particular one, and they're all kind of similar, Handel's early oratorios are like that too. They just, you get a bunch of biblical characters and they sit around and they talk about Jesus. That's the plot. Right? Handel's the resurrection. That's, I mean, there's Satan's in one of them. That's a good guy. That's a good character to have. There's no Satan here. What you have in this one is St. Peter and Mary Magdalene and King David are all hanging out at the Sepulcher, the Holy Sepulcher, talking about Jesus. Now, you might not think, it's a great subject if you happen to be a penitential Catholic on the day and with nothing else to do, but listen to this stuff. But you might not think that for future generations, that would be much of an exciting topic for a piece of music, would you? But you'd be wrong. I'm telling you, you're wrong. So the piece consists of a sinfonia, an opening sinfonia, which is about 8 minutes long. It's a big piece, plus 4 monstrous da capo arias of about 10 minutes each for all of the characters, and then a big central aria for St. Peter, and then a closing chorus. And there are the usual recitatives, some accompanied, some not. And that's it. That's the whole thing. It plays for like 67 minutes. And, you'd have to be crazy to listen to the thing, right? Particularly on your birthday. Well, I've got some samples because this is on Supraphon and I can play samples. And I'm going to show you that you should be listening to this on any occasion. It's perfect for weddings, for bar mitzvahs, for you name it. It's just great stuff, period. So let's look at the opening sinfonia. Is a typical Baroque sinfonia, right? They have sort of a slow, marchy introduction in jerky rhythms, and then a fugal allegro. Well, this one does. But listen to a bit of this opening. Just listen to the opening, to the syncopation, to the rhythmic tension that Zelenka creates in this supposedly slow and march-like introduction. Here, give it a listen. Now, what Baroque music sounds like that? A, and then you get to the fugal allegro. Zelenka's fugue subjects, Bach loved Zelenka because he knew Zelenka was unique. And his fugue subjects are, you could have CPE Bach, PDQ Bach could have written them. This one is particularly quirky. Just listen to this fugue subject. Listen to the way it gets going. That makes for a wonderful contrapuntal texture. Why? Because the head motive, the beginning of the fugue, ba ba bum 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 ba da da bum ba da da bum 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 ba da da, and then the chromatic fall da 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 da. You can't forget it. You can't not follow it wherever it appears. It is so ear-catching and so bizarre compared to normal sort of fugue subjects. I mean, so many of them in Baroque music, they're just musical tags, they're formulas. And the point, of course, is the contrapuntal working out. It's building up the edifice out of very nondescript material. Zelenka's material is not nondescript. So let's talk about some of the arias. Well, St. Peter has an aria called Lingua Perfida, which means, of course, treacherous tongue. And you know what that's about. It's a biblical oratorio. So it's about, the serpent and, misleading Eve and lies and treachery and sinful, terrible, awful speech and naughty bits and all of that stuff, right? Here is the opening of Lingua Perfida, which does not, most Baroque arias, they have like a ritornello, an orchestral introduction, and then the soloist comes in, and then the solo lines alternate with bits of the ritornello, and they sort of go around like that in a circle. And that's usually your A section. Then you have a B section, which is separate, and then the A section comes back, and they repeat it with ornamentation. That was called the da capo aria, meaning from the beginning, because you repeat it. Well, Zelenka plays with the idea of a normal ritornello because it's not an orchestral introduction. He introduces it with the singer, then plays the ritornello, and then the singer comes back. So it's bracketed by the words lingua perfida, treacherous tongue. And here is how he does that in St. Peter's aria.
Lingua perfida, quel serpente che nello il trema ingannò.
Pretty cool, huh? And then, of course, you got the vocal line, which goes all over the place. It's very, very, very difficult because, like Bach, Zelenka's vocal writing was purely instrumental. He just expected people to do everything or anything that, like, a violin could do. And if they couldn't, it was too bad. They just had to, wing it. So there's that, right? And then you have Mary Magdalene, who in this marvelous performance, by the way, is sung by Magdalene, Magdalena Kozhina in her early youth. See, there she is. Magdalena Kozhina sings Mary Magdalene, and she gets a couple of arias, including one of those typically sort of Catholic arias about blood gushing from the side of Jesus and how wonderful that was. And that's something which, whatever it may mean liturgically, I simply cannot sympathize with as a topic. And of course, it's a good thing that all the blood is gushing. And here she is, chirpily singing along about the happy gushing blood. So there you go. Here it is. right. So that's one bit. And then, best of all, and it's not because he's my namesake, is the aria of King David. Now, King David sings, he gets the accompanied recitative in this piece. There's always one of those, where you get to have the orchestra participate. It's not just like a harpsichord dry accompaniment. And King David sings an aria that basically says the following: if only I had been hanging around on the Via Dolorosa as the jeering crowd was mocking Christ on the way to the Calvary, where they crucified him, I would have been able to whip out my harp and charm everybody with music, and the whole thing would have turned out really very, very differently. That is the text of the aria. And I'm not making fun of it. That is the text of the aria. I mean, some of these things, and because, one of the things about, sacred music of this type is that because it was sacred, they took it very, very seriously, even when they were being unintentionally comical. And this is unintentionally comical, but that's not the point. The point is that the aria is about music, and composers who knew what they were doing when they got liturgical arias about music really went wild. And that's exactly what Zelenka does. This is what you might call the Baroque equivalent of the pizzicato scherzo in Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony. It kind of does that. And it because he's doing the harp, so he's using pizzicato violins, but there's a double ritornello, and there's a big orchestral introduction, and then the harp business starts. And that goes on, and it's really about 2 minutes or so before King David even gets to sing a minute of music. And here is part, mind you, of the harp ritornello piece of King David's aria. Okay, so enough of this jollity. After that, all of the soloists come together. They do a final recitative about the meaning of being at the Holy Sepulcher and the sacrifice of Jesus, and then there's a final chorus begging for God's mercy, and that wraps the whole thing up. I think the music speaks for itself, doesn't it? Even more than anything I could possibly say, it's just so much fun. It doesn't, it just is. And I don't know whether that would have been considered liturgically appropriate. According to the booklet notes, this performance, and let me tell you who's doing it. It's the Capella Regia Musicalis under Robert Hugo. This is a Czech period instrument group which plays beautifully. And the soloists, as I mentioned, are Magdalene Kozhina and Martin Prokosch, and as King David, and as St. Peter, Michael Pospischel. I think I said that right. I like Martin Prokosch. Prokosch was sort of, that was a dish my grandmother used to make. It was stuffed cabbage. I don't know if that's what his last name means, but that's what it was when I was growing up. Anyway, it's wonderful to get to know this music. It really is. And for me, and I think for a lot of you too, the purpose in reviving this stuff and listening to it is to find a composer, like I said, whose music is inspired by and at every point illuminated by the text. And that's what Zelenka does. His music is incredible. And don't worry, we are going to talk about his other works. We're going to get to the trio sonatas and the orchestral pieces and just a huge bunch of masses and responsories and other things, liturgical works, because that's what he wrote basically. And it's just marvelous. It's incredible stuff. Incredibly sensitive, original, quirky, and fascinating music. So I'm really looking forward to telling you about it. And I hope this little birthday introduction to Zelenka gives you a sense of just how fearless you should be when you explore his works. Don't worry about the titles. Don't worry about what you think it may be about. The music is going to be wonderful. That's a guarantee. And just the best possible reason to keep on listening to Jan Dismas Zelenka. Thank you, and take care.